is the Mindless Quilt. Now that's not what Moda calls it. This is a free download from the Moda website, and there is a link to that pattern download in the description below the video. So that's one link. And their sample quilt here is 8 blocks across and 10 blocks down for a total of 80 blocks. And you need 40 2.5-inch strips to make it. If you decide you want to make a bigger or a smaller quilt, you take the number of blocks you need, which in this case is 80, divide it by 2. So down here, how much fabric do I need? Number of blocks divided by 2 equals the number of strips. So this is 80 blocks, we need 40 strips. Easy peasy. And after I go over this pattern with you, I'm going to show you my app for sizing a quilt that's free to use on my blog. So I've added some things to it. In addition to calculating the number of blocks you need and the block size, as well as the binding fabric you need, it will also give you, if you have a sashing, it'll give you the number of sashing and cornerstones to cut and the fabric you need for that. If you want to add a border, it'll give you 2 ways to cut the border, either crosswise or lengthwise grain, and the fabric you need for that. And it'll also give you the fabric you need for your backing. So after we go over this, we're going to go over the app, and it's really simple to understand. The instructions are very good. They're 2 pages. Here's the second page, and a diagram here shows you how to cut the pieces you need, and then it shows you how to piece them. Here's what the block looks like. It's just 3 2-inch finished squares and a 2-inch by 6-inch finished rectangles on either side. What you do is take 2 strips of fabric. They don't have to coordinate. Mine is totally scrappy. I just grabbed 2 and I stack them together. And I'm going to put the selvage on the left-hand side. This ruler is 6.5 inches wide, so I'm going to place it with my line across one edge of the strips, and I'm going to trim off the selvage. Now this is 6.5 inches, and I need to cut 2 at 6.5 inches, so I'll just go ahead and cut this one and move this down. Position this again for 6.5 inches. Cut another one. Now I need to cut 3 at 2.5 inches from the remaining. And 3 times 2.5 is 7.5. So I'm going to lay my ruler like this. And I put the 1/4 inch mark along the edge of the fabric because it's easier to see. And then I'm putting the 7.5 inch mark over here on this cut side. I'll trim off the fold. Slide this down to the 5, so that leaves a 2.5 inch square, and slide this down to the 2.5 inch. You don't have to cut it this way, you can cut it the way you normally cut, but this is how I cut because it saves you from cutting, picking up the ruler, repositioning the ruler. All you do is slide it down. So these are the pieces you'll cut, and this one set, this will make 4 blocks. So you'll get 2 blocks like this and 2 blocks like that. 4 blocks out of 2 strips of fabric. And I had some scraps of strips already cut, so I used a lot of those. Then I had some fat quarters I wanted to use. And if you use fat quarters, if you put 2 fat quarters together, and let me just show you by one. So here's one fat quarter. This is the 21 inches, this is the selvage, and this is the 18 inches. You'll need to cut across the 21 inches, and you'll make the same cuts, but for each strip, you'll only get enough for 1 block. So if you put these 2 together, and I'll just cut one, now I've layered these 2 together, right sides together, and I'm going to fold it from the selvage to the cut edge, like this. and I want to cut, I'll cut one strip right now. You can get 6 strips out of this. So let's trim off the ragged edges, flip this around, and cut a 2.5 inch strip. And we'll put this to the side. So now you'll take this here's my selvage over here. Do the same thing. I'm going to place the line on the top edge, cut off the selvage, cut this 6.5, reposition the ruler and cut another 6.5, and then place it at the 7.5 inch. And the reason I use the 1/4 inch mark as a guide is easier to see that line than trying to put the edge of the ruler on top of this. Just a lot easier. So 7.5 inches, and I've got my 1/4 inch line across the top. Cut off the ragged edge, pick it up and slide it down to the 5 inch mark and the 2.5 inch mark. And then you have your same pieces of fabric, only this makes 2 blocks. And that will be your 2 blocks from one strip of the fat quarters. So the 2 fat quarters will give you a total of 12 blocks. I pressed these fabrics that way, the way they said in here, and these I pressed outward, so I pressed exactly the same way they said. Now if you look at this block, it's 6.5 inch unfinished. It has these 2 horizontal pieces at the top and the bottom, and you're going to take that block and rotate every alternate one. That way you don't have any seams to match except for the seams between the blocks. When you put your blocks together, you can use the method I show in my video called using numbered charms to put your quilt together, and I'll have a link to that at the bottom. So now let's look at the quilting app, and you can see how big to make your quilt. What we're going to do is first look at the app, and I'm going to show you how Sizing the Quilt app works. You might want to download these worksheets for sizing a quilt. The first 2 pages are what we'll use today. The 3rd page is figuring out your fabric, but we're not going to do that on this video. The first page just tells you how all the calculations are made, so you'll understand what you need to do and what you're using the calculator for. And then the 2nd page is where you can write all of your results when we go through the worksheet, and we'll do that. So what you'll do is, there's a link to my blog, and this is it on my iPad. This is the home page of the blog, and you see there's a lot of ads, but I'm going to show you how to get rid of those. And the first part, you'll look at Quilting Apps right here and press this button, and then it will take you to Quilt Calculators Sizing a Quilt. So let's see, if we make this bigger, then the ads go away. All you need to work with this app is the block finished size, the width and the length. And then you have to have an idea of how big you want the quilt in inches. You can't just say, oh, I want a queen size. You have to say, I want an 85 by 95 quilt. And so you're going to guess at these blocks across and blocks down till we get the number we like. So I'll just take you through it once without writing anything down. For this example, I'll use the size quilt that I made, my Mindless Quilt. So the block finished width is 6 inches and the length is 6 inches. And we're working with finished lengths, finished numbers on this app. And I made my quilt 10 across and 13 down. But I'll just put here, let's just put 11. 11 across and 10 down, just to show you how it works. And right now we're not going to do a sash or a border. Then we press this calculate button, and it gives you the quilt width is 66 inches and the length is 60 inches. Well, I want it bigger than that. So I'll go back up here to the blocks across, and let's put 10 across, and let's put 13 down. That's what I ended up with. Then you'll have to press the calculate button again, and it gives you 60 by 78. So that's good enough for me. That's the size I want. Here's where you're going to start writing down all your results, but we'll just go over them for now. It gives you the actual width of the quilt, which is 60 by 78, and the total number of blocks is 130. This tells you how much binding fabric you need. You need 0.56 yards. You'll need to cut 8 strips at 2.5 inches times width of fabric. That's for your binding. The sash, we didn't put anything in. The cornerstones, we didn't put anything in. This all goes with the sashing. Here, if we had put a border in, we would have the border crosswise cuts. That's from width of fabric. And the border lengthwise cuts. That's cutting along the lengthwise grain. And here's the backing. You'll need 4.67 yards, and you'll cut 2 lengths of 84 inches. When you download this Quilting Apps worksheet, it will tell you how everything is calculated. So for the backing, we're always doing this vertical seam on the back. That's just how this calculator works. And so you'll know that. And it works with directional fabric and non-directional fabric. And when it says you'll cut 2 lengths at 84 inches, this is what your backing will look like. This is 84 inches and this is 84 inches with a seam down the middle. Okay? So go through this and decide what size quilt you want for your Mindless quilt, and just keep putting your numbers in. You know it's going to be 6 inches across for the block size and 6 inches long. And then let's put in, let's say you wanted a smaller quilt, and let's just put 7 in there, and let's put 7. We'll make a square quilt. 7 blocks across and 7 blocks down, and be sure to hit the calculate button each time you change your numbers. So here the quilt will be 42 inches by 42 inches, and the total number of blocks is 49. Here's the fabric for the binding and how many strips you need to cut. We'll skip over the sashing, cornerstones, and the borders. Here's the backing fabric. You'll need 2.67 yards. You'll cut 2 lengths at 48 inches. Let's do one more example of using sashing and borders. So let's say we have this quilt is 7 across and 7 down, and let's put a sash in there of 2 inches, 2-inch finished, and let's put a border of 4 inches. Okay, then we'll press the well, let's go over it. So the block is 6 inches by 6 inches finished. We have 7 blocks across and 7 blocks down. The sash is 2-inch finished, and the border is 4-inch finished. So now we'll press the calculate button, and our quilt is now 66 inches wide by 66 inches long. The total number of blocks is 49. This tells you how much fabric you need for the binding. You need about a half a yard. And remember that these are the exact sizes you need, so I suggest buying extra fabric than what it says. You'll cut 7 strips at 2.5 inches times the width of fabric. And here's the sashing. You need 46 inches of sashing fabric, or 1.28 yards. You'll cut 7 strips at 6.5 inches times the width of fabric, and you'll subcut 112 segments at 2.5 inches. That's for your sashing. Your cornerstones, you'll need 10 inches of fabric, or 0.28 yards. Cut 4 strips at 2.5 inches times the width of fabric. Subcut 64 segments at 2.5 inches. So it gives you the fabric you need plus your cutting instructions. Now here's the border. You have 2 choices. You can cut the border along the crosswise grain or cut it along the lengthwise grain, and this gives you both options. And it tells you how to cut them. So for crosswise, you'll need about a yard, 0.88. Cut 7 strips at 4.5 inches times width of fabric, and then you'll use those for your border. For the lengthwise cut, you'll need almost 2 yards, You'll cut 4 strips at 4.5 inches along the lengthwise grain. Then last, we have the backing fabric. You'll need 4 yards of backing. You'll cut 2 lengths of 72 inches. Then what you'll do, this second sheet of the Quilting Apps worksheet has where you can put all of your results here. I'll just put this here and write the results from the app. So you can put the quilt name if you like, the date started and complete. So the quilt finished size, this is what you would write your desired width, what you wanted it to actually be, width and length. And here's the actual width and length. Put this so you can see it. So our actual width, we'll just go up to the top. Go up to the top here, where we had the first results, and it was 66 by 66. We'll write that here. I'm using a friction pen because you can erase it, and it's red so you can see what I'm writing. The block finished size is 6 inches wide and 6 inches long. In the setting, we put 7 blocks across and 7 blocks down. And the number of blocks is 49. And the binding fabric, we need 0.49 yards. And we'll need to cut 7 strips at 2.5 inches. You just keep going down and transfer all of your results onto this paper. Then you'll have a big record of everything you need for that quilt. And this doesn't do the block calculations. In some other videos, I've shown how to calculate fabric for the blocks. That's the second app on this page called How Much Fabric Do I Need? And we're going to be doing more of these so you can see how much fabric you need for all of your blocks. So that's it for this week. I hope you can do one of your mindless quilts and get on the website and play with the Sizing a Quilt app and see what you can do with that. I think you're going to really like it. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos.